This is the story of a girl who cried a river and drowned the whole...
Heidi ho, and welcome back for the final installment of the worst idea that I have ever had. Today's book is The Rest of the Story by Sarah Dessen. What got into me to think that it would be a good idea to read and review every single book that she's ever written? I will never understand, because this is 14 books, guys. Do you know how long it has taken me to read 14 books? Recording and then editing all these books. So I'm so glad that it's over with. Like I said, today is the rest of the story. And I remember this one standing out because it largely takes place in a completely different universe than the rest of her books do. We start in one of our main locations, but then the main character, Emma, or Emma Saylor, ends up going to spend part of her summer with her estranged family in a completely different beach town than we've ever been to. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. It was refreshing, but at the same time, it felt like I was betrayed, because one of the things I love about Dessen's novels is how intertwined they are. So I was like, why are we leaving? Why are we leaving Colby? Why are we leaving Lakeview? What's going on here? I think it's kind of a smart move for her, because you don't want to be pigeonholed. Main character, she's 17, and she comes from two different worlds herself. Her parents, so the whole story centers around North Lake and Lake North, which is the same place, the same lake. It's just we have the locals, and then at some point rich people came and they said, we want to be part of this community, but we need to differentiate ourselves from the poor people. So they divided this lake, and they said Lake North is going to be where the highfalutin folks are going to be. Her dad came from Lake North. Her mom came from North Lake. There's always this gray area during the summers where the locals and the rich kids do come together. But normally, like we see with her cousin Bailey, it doesn't last. The locals are just playthings. But for Emma's parents, they seem to be able to make it work. And I say seemed because they absolutely did not make it work. I don't know if they ever could have made it work, but her mother, Waverly, has substance abuse issues, which greatly impacted their relationship. And that also caused her to die before the novel opened, which is then part of the reason that Emma doesn't have any interactions with her Calvender side. There's just a whole host of issues for me there regarding her father and how it works, but we're not going to get into that yet. Her father's side calls her Emma. Her mother's side calls her Saylor. So we have a division of who she is, and by the end of this novel, she has to decide who she's going to choose to be. We open with her at her father's wedding. He's a dentist. He's marrying another dentist named Tracy. Emma loves this lady. She thinks she's great. Prior to marriage, she and her dad had been living with her Nana. Her Nana is very wealthy. It had, after the divorce, she had opened her home to her son and her granddaughter, not realizing how permanent it was going to become. Now that the dad is getting married, she has said, you're going to move into your place, so I'm going to renovate my place. But his place also needs some kind of renovation. So while he and Tracy are off in Greece, she is going to go to Egypt, whereas Emma is going to stay with one of her best friends. Gets a call in the middle of the night, and the best friend's like, hey, I'm so sorry. Grandpa had a stroke. We are going to Ohio. Where does she go? Hannah suggests that Emma goes and sees her Mimi Calvender. This is one thing that I'm glad that I went back writing my notes, because I was 100% positive that the dad was the one who had suggested it and that he had pushed for it, whereas she was like, I don't even know these people, why would I want to go there? Only for him, and this is kind of a glimpse into my issue with him, completely turn around and be extremely prejudicial towards the poor. She had been to Lake North once before when she was very young. Her parents had been trying to work on their marriage, and so when they went on their second honeymoon, They dropped her off with Waverly's family. She apparently had a great summer, befriended this kid named Rue, real name is Christopher. His dad had been Waverly's best friend growing up. There had been a boating incident which had caused Christopher's dad's death. She doesn't remember any of this. However, she sees that this is the best thing to do. So she's like, well, if I don't want to force my dad and his new wife to postpone their honeymoon, this is what I'm gonna do. She agrees. She gets to Lake North, or North Lake. Sorry, I'm probably gonna mix those two up. But she gets to North Lake. It's kind of awkward. It's one of those situations where if you had a guest in your house and you didn't know how to act around them, add to the fact that she is the rich cousin, people don't really welcome her with open arms. What we do know is that Mimi owns a local motel called Calvinder's, and she works there, as does one of the cousins named Trinity. And what is going on? I got a new computer and all this stuff pops up sometimes when I move my hand, so I guess that's something in settings that I need to fix. Back to Trinity. Trinity is 1920. She got pregnant by this guy that they call Sarge because he is a sergeant in, I think, the Army. He is currently deployed. I kept waiting for Sarge to back out, to not come through. But while he never shows up, she does not actually give birth. While he never shows up, I thought that was a letdown because all we hear about as this book goes on is how pregnant she is, how ready she is to have this baby, how ready she is to have Sarge back. And then the fact that when Emma and her dad get to Mimi's, the one thing that he notices that is different is that they have this flashy new toaster. Who do you think got them that flashy new toaster? Sarge. And this thing, it can pop out 6 pieces of toast at once. Apparently, this whole family, all they do for breakfast is eat toast, because if he's gonna gift them this toaster, they're darn well gonna use it. The amount of bread they go through a day is astonishing. We have Bailey, Trinity, Celeste, Anna Gordon, Mimi, Oxford, Jack, who is, I believe, Bailey's brother as well, or maybe he's just a cousin, going through 6 slices of bread each. I love toast, but holy cow. Do we not have eggs with our toast? Do we not have bacon with our toast? I get it, let's put this toaster to good use, but there's a lot of other things that you can eat with your toast, or there's a lot of other things you can toast. It's Dessen's quirk. Emma is hanging around and everybody keeps calling her Saylor. She's like, but my name is Emma. Apparently Waverly had always called her Saylor. Emma's dad sails, and that is something that the two had bonded over when they first met. It's an homage to the sailing, even though it's spelled differently. She hates sailing, which is another thing that I'll get into. At a certain point, I think it was Rue said, well, like, what's your name? Or maybe it was Bailey. Somebody eventually said, what do you want us to call you? And she decided on Saylor. Trinity does not like her, and she cannot figure out why. And it turns out Trinity does not like the fact that Emma shows up and is supposed to just be coddled. She's on vacation while the rest of them have to work. Valid points, but I feel like this is something that, while there are prejudices towards the poor, there are also prejudices against the rich. Trinity doesn't know Saylor. She knows nothing about Saylor's upbringing, and Saylor does acknowledge that she hasn't had to work. So there are things that she can't relate to regarding Trinity and this side of her family, because she could have worked, but it wasn't necessary, whereas for these, it is. But the thing is, she's 17. She's still legally a child, and in many ways, she is a child. There's a lot of life that she has not lived. How can you really fault her for something that was out of her control? Mimi shows up and her knees are acting up, so she cannot help out at the motel, and neither can anybody else. Trinity's like, I'm 8 months pregnant. This is not gonna happen. Saylor is like, let me help, and nobody will let her help. which, going back to my earlier point, Mimi does not want her to be working because that's not the point of her vacation, of her stay. For me, I'm like, well, what is the point of her stay? Because it doesn't seem like anybody wants to have much to do with her. She does, I think on the first night, go down to the dock and ride out into the lake with Jack, which upsets his girlfriend Taylor because she thinks that Saylor is another girl, which causes a whole host of problems, which I don't feel were ever really fully resolved. This is where she re-encounters Rue. This is where she initially meets Bailey. This is also where we meet Colin, Bailey's rich love interest. She says, let me help at the motel, and nobody will let her. She eventually talks her way into it because she's working so closely with Trinity. Trinity tells her, hey, here's the deal. This is why I feel about you the way I do. This is why we all act around you the way we do. Hard work and determination and a lot of elbow grease get her into the fold. But Bailey is, and I both liked and disliked this aspect because it's so true for the summer romance, for wanting what you don't have. Bailey has always coveted Lake North. She's always wanted to know what it's like to be at the club, to stay at the tides, just to know what that life is like. She and Colin have this relationship of sorts. Turns out that apparently he's already in a relationship with someone, yet they have an understanding for the summer, which I guess means that they're together, but if they want to mess around with other people, it's okay. Bailey says, Saylor, come with me. I'm meeting up with Colin. He's got a friend named Blake, and Saylor has never had experience with guys, which surprised me that she let this complete stranger that she doesn't even like give her her first kiss. He and Blake work for the club. They work with the sailing department. Anybody who works for the club, they stay in dorms that is called campus. The next step is club prom. So all of this is happening in the first fourth of the book. That's also something that threw me off because it feels like an entire story right there. This is generally what a Dessen novel will be like, where we have the girl who is out of place, she acclimates to being in place, meets a guy, something explodes, and she has her revelation and the end of the story. No, all that happens in the first fourth of the novel, but it is not the novel. We are supposed to learn things from this experience. Club prom rolls around. Bailey is so excited, but Colin still hasn't asked her. So while Colin hasn't asked Bailey, Blake has asked Saylor. While they're over at campus, Colin takes Bailey outside. The next thing we know, they come back in and he's asked her. She's all excited. But he's been very distant from her, not texting her, not being as emotionally invested in her, and obviously the fact that prom is a week away and he still hadn't asked her was all very fishy. Does Bailey care? No. Does she even see the signs? No. Which makes it both relatable and frustrating because as the reader, you're like, girl, wise up. But at the same time, if I thought back to when I was 17, it's that drama, that adrenaline high, you live off of it. Saylor, who, as I said, hates sailing, equally hates driving. Her father has forced her into both. He cannot understand why she doesn't like sailing, but more than that, he can't understand why she doesn't want to drive. But in order to get a dress for club prom, she will have to drive there. And because everybody works, nobody can take her. She borrows Mimi's car, but she doesn't get very far before she starts freaking out. She pulls into a parking lot where she runs into Rue. Rue has 4 jobs at this point. He's coming home from one job at a nursing home, and I forget why, but he is driving something called the Yum truck, which is a glorified ice cream truck. He offers to go with her, and the compromise is he'll drive there if she drives back. They have this great time, except for the fact that she cannot find a dress, and what she ends up going with is one that he picked out. It is time for club prom. Rue had been asked by this girl named Hannah, who, does he like her, does he not like her? Spoiler, obviously he is Saylor's love interest, so no, he doesn't like her. But he, at this point, has said, well, I have to work, I can't go. And Blake comes to get Saylor, but there's no Colin. Baylor is asking, where's Colin? And Blake keeps saying, that's his issue, I'm staying out of it. They get out of him that, well, he has a girlfriend. He had already asked this girlfriend to go to club prom with him, which his side was that it's not that he asked her necessarily, like, he did ask her, not thinking she'd actually go, but, you know, it was this kind of understanding because they're together that she would go with him. I thought that whole situation needed more. I didn't really know how I was supposed to feel about Colin, but what I did feel was not much. Saylor's like, well, Bailey's not gonna go, I'm not gonna go. Which then leads them to going to Rue's house. They decide to have their own prom. I don't know if this is going to end up being an annual thing. I think that would be kind of cool, but the insinuation is this is the first of many years to come. Bailey gets absolutely wasted. Saylor has the time of her life, and she and Rue have a moment. The moment gets ruined, but she's, by this point, recognizes that she likes Rue, and even though the moment was interrupted, she's very excited about where it can lead. Well, it doesn't lead anywhere, which causes her to start to second guess herself. Around this same time, it is now time for her to go home. Her dad absolutely will not let her stay, which I don't understand. This is me feeling like his development was confusing. At first you think he's this really great guy. He's supportive of his daughter getting to know her extended family, and that he was the exception to the rule, that he and Waverly were the real deal. When in actuality what we get from him is he is extremely prejudiced. He wants her to have nothing to do with her family. When it comes to Rue, he has some grudge against Rue for who knows what reason, except that Waverly had always been known as a wild child. Rue's dad had been an equally wild child. He's just assuming that Rue is the same kind of person. I found it very frustrating that her father would not budge. He was so strict about it, so hard about it, and I couldn't figure out why. If he's gonna break the rules for Waverly, doesn't he have some kind of understanding? Sorry, go away. He obviously doesn't have much respect or regard for his daughter because he doesn't trust her to be able to make her own decisions. Anyways, the family comes, and it turns out that neither of their homes are ready. So Nana, and this is something else that I found surprising, was that Nana was the one who was open-minded about this North Lake situation. I would have assumed that when he was fooling around with someone from the other side of the tracks, she would have been all like, oh, why are you doing that? We're better than that. But no, she seems to want Saylor or Emma or whoever she is at this point, because now her dad is like, why are they calling you Saylor? But the grandmother is the one who is a voice of reason. She's a respite from the storm. They come, and the grandmother had for many years been telling the owner of this highfalutin hotel, the Tides, thank you for your invitation to come, but not now. Well, she takes him up on his invitation, and they get to stay in some kind of penthouse, the lap of luxury. Taylor, Jack's girlfriend, it's her birthday. Saylor had been planning on going. Well, her dad was like, no, you're not gonna go to a birthday on that side of the tracks. She is like, well, you know, these are all the things that you want me to do, but I've also committed to this. And she almost has him until she mentions Rue. And this is when he completely loses his mind and for no reason whatsoever lays down the law and says, absolutely not. I don't want you anywhere near that guy. Her dad bothered me. He was what the mothers usually are in these novels. Very unforgiving, very judgmental. I thought this was real rich. He knows how much she hates sailing, yet he forces her to go out on the lake with him and Tracy, who is also an expert sailor. They met in a sailing class. He forces her to come out on the boat with him, knowing how much she dislikes this. There are issues with this boat. They almost run into something called a starfish, which I guess is like a little boat. In order to avoid hitting this starfish, which had a father and son on it, they take on water. It's an SOS situation. She sees Bailey and she's like, hey Bailey, come help us. And her dad gets so mad because he's like, you never ask for help unless you really needed it. And Tracy says, well, we really needed it, like we're sinking. No, Bailey comes and helps them out. Blake had been the one to get them to their sailboat in the first place. He then tells her, oh, hey, yeah, the birthday party. She does end up going, but she lies to him. She says that she's going to go to the movie on the beach. Blake has the wrong impression. She's thinking he's just being nice and he's giving her a ride. He's thinking, this is my second chance. So they pull up to the house and Rue is there to greet them. Rue is helping unload this car and she's hiding in the back. She does not want him to see her. When he does see her, what do you think the next thing that happens is? Blake takes her hand, weaves his fingers through hers to make it look like they're on a date. This obviously puts Rue off. The next thing she sees is Rue in the kitchen talking with Hannah in very close quarters. So she gets drunk. She never drinks, but she gets drunk. The next thing she knows, she is in the Yum truck and they're taking her back to the Tides. But it's an hour after last time her dad had texted her, which I guess means it's also an hour after the movie ended. They encounter the Tides police called Later Gator. I forget what the official name is, but they all call him Later Gator. Her dad has called Later Gator. First, Bailey hops out the back of the truck because she's already gotten in trouble with Later Gator and she's apparently banned from the property. Rue pulls over, does everything he's supposed to. He's been driving safely. And Later Gator treats him like a criminal, as does her father. Do not understand why. I don't understand at what point he looked like he was doing something inappropriately. Why are we punishing him for getting her back safely? Why are we jumping to all these conclusions? All of this just infuriates her dad more because not only is it Rue, but she's been drinking. So they, what are they? I just don't get it. This is gonna have to stop. Now she is in deep doo-doo. She is restricted from everything. And I'm having major issues with this dad. I know this is a book, which is why it goes the way it goes. It doesn't have to be a certain time limit before you can file a missing persons report. She's been missing for an hour, maybe two. Maybe because it's private property and it's club owned, it's completely different, but I was like, seriously? Like, why are we freaking out? Now that she's confined to her room, can I also say one thing that bothered me? Because of the side of the lake she's coming from, Blake can call in all these people from the other side of the lake, act like she is one of the poor kids. She never corrects them. And it's not that she has to, but I think what really bugged me was she acknowledges that her lifestyle does not match up with her cousin's lifestyle, that she is a Lake North person, but she never once acts like she's a Lake North person. I didn't quite understand that part of her characterization, how she's just a down-home girl who's gonna get her scrub on in the local motel. I would have liked some moments where she was like, I have to do that? Something that says she did grow up privileged versus I grew up privileged, but nobody's ever gonna know it. Anywho, one day her phone rings, and it's this cold caller talking about buying storm drains and shutters and everything, but it's actually Rue. This just snowballs into them deepening their relationship because this is one of his new jobs. He's filling in for somebody who's on vacation. While he's on the phone with her, he'll pretend to be selling her something when his boss is around, and then they'll have conversation when his boss is out of earshot. This reconnects them and strengthens her feelings for him. Her grandmother, who has noticed everything, even says, well, hey, there might be room for one more at the dinner table, because it's under the premise that thank you for taking her in, but hey, let's stick one more person in there because I know that you have a crush on this guy. Well, the closer that we get to this, well, first off, we do have a moment where she and her dad have a come to Jesus moment, and they sort of come to terms about things, but the closer we get to this dinner, the more we start hearing about this storm that's approaching. The people at the Tides and the club are like, no worries, we are ready for this, we are sturdily built, nothing can knock us down, whereas everybody else on the lake is battening down the hatches, which bothered me because I understand putting on a good face for your guests. Absolutely, don't alarm them, but I would have liked for them to have accepted, hey, there's a storm coming. Here are some cautionary procedures that we're going to do just to make sure you guys are safe, rather than 100% lying to them. The storm rolls through, and I thought this was a little hyperbolic. Trinity, who is not an emotional person, doesn't seem like a particularly needy person. The only thing that she gets really diva-ish about is her pregnancy and all the things that she shouldn't be doing as a pregnant woman, all the things that bother her as a pregnant woman. She and Gordon are by themselves at Mimi's house. She calls Saylor up and she's freaking out because a tree had fallen and water was coming through. She says, I'm not having my baby, but I don't like being here. Saylor says, we'll just come to you. And her dad is like, why do we have to do that? So I think now this is in complete opposition to his behavior later on in the chapter. So he's completely resistant to going to help Trinity. And he's like, oh, well, doesn't she have family? And Saylor's like, I am her family. We are her family. This bothered me. Like, her dad had very little development. I loved Tracy. I thought Tracy was great, but I need someone to put him in his place. His money came from his mother. So why is she not saying, you need to stop acting like a spoiled brat? You need to treat these people better. Like, why is she not putting her foot down? Saylor gets him to come help her, but of course they couldn't get to their car because their car was parked by valet. Nobody's at the valet station. They get the keys, they go find the car, but it's blocked in by all these other cars. Saylor, who is now a super driver of sorts. Okay, I mean, I'm not a super driver, but I feel like I'm pretty decent with parallel parking. I don't think I could have done what she did. So this person who has very little driving experience is all of a sudden really confident and incredibly capable to do something that most experienced drivers cannot do. She gets them out of the tight spot and then they're driving. They have a phone call from Celeste, but before Celeste can actually tell them what's going on, the line breaks off. What happened was that a tree had fallen in the middle of the road, so they could not then pass this point. Who do you think shows up? And I would really love to know how this happened. But Rue and the young truck appear on the other side of this tree. He takes them to Trinity, and now Trinity's freaking out because Gordon is gone. This is where the dad's behavior becomes uncharacteristic. Saylor says, I'm gonna go find Gordon. He's like, no, I'm gonna find Gordon. You stay here. So for somebody who couldn't have cared less about her family, you're putting your life in danger for this kid. He finds her, which turns out that he, for some reason, knew she would go to this shed that Waverly would go to whenever she'd have one of her disappearing acts. I don't know. It was a good guess. He hasn't been there in almost 20 years, so why that, I don't know. Doesn't make sense to me, but it's part of the book, so we're gonna accept it. Does she get in trouble? No. Apparently, she doesn't like when people yell at her, and Trinity, in her delirious state, had yelled at her, so she grabbed her book, which, can I say, this whole Guardians series that Dessen brings up, if it could have actually had a purpose, I would have been fine, but I didn't need her to point it out every single time for it having no purpose. Gordon grabs this book and she goes and hides. At no point did she say, oh my gosh, maybe I should go back because of this storm that's rolling in. So she put her life in danger. And then she put the dad's life in danger, and she would have put anybody else's life who tried to come and find her in danger because her feelings were hurt. Storm blows over. The tides has suffered enough damage that nobody can stay there. Thankfully, Saylor and her family know somebody, and it just so happens that Calvinder's has 2 empty rooms. Because they never actually got to have that dinner, they have it at Mimi's, and it is catered by the tides. So Bailey is happy because she gets to use her oyster fork. Everything is hunky-dory. Dad is understanding. Saylor is now with Rue because they had the little make-out session during or after the storm. She has decided that she's going to accept both of her sides, so she is going to be Emma Saylor. The dad does let her stay a little bit longer. He and Tracy and Nana head out because their places are ready to go. But because she has longer goodbyes, he says, sure, you can stay. She doesn't know where things are gonna go. She doesn't know how things are gonna work out with Rue, but she knows that she needs to give it a shot. And that's that. To touch on a couple small things, Bailey and Colin do reconnect in a sense. Is there any good explanation given about this? Absolutely not. What does happen is that the birthday party, Colin was supposed to show up. Because she gets so drunk, Bailey needed to leave. So because she needed to leave, she couldn't either give him the time he wanted or meet him the way he wanted. This has that adverse effect of he wants her more. So I do not know the status of their relationship. Bailey never wised up, and at this point I stopped relating to that whole summer romance thing. That's the book. It wasn't as bad as some of the other books, but I felt like there was a lot happening, and true to Dessen, she just likes quirk, and because she likes to have so much quirk in there, she sort of loses focus. So I thought there were some really important themes and motifs that could have had more focus, but because of all these other little things that she's trying to put in there, I mean, this convoluted family tree, I don't understand. This whole thing about Sarge being off and her being pregnant, was that completely necessary? No. There's so many things that I thought we didn't need in there that could have streamlined what did need to be there. But there we go. That is Sarah Dessen. Thank you for bearing with me, and have a great day. Bye.